that you can see my screen?
Oh, yes, we can.
Perfect. 0 to 1. Book review. This is a book written by Peter Thiel. I wanted to say thief because if you put F at the extreme end, that becomes what? So, but Thiel. Is that how to pronounce it for those of you whose diction and accent is very spot on? Yeah. I'm just going to go quickly into my slide. I try to always do a little bit of introduction of who I am for those who are joining us online and for those who are not very familiar with the boardroom. My name is Princess Uduak and Oluwatoyin. Currently outside the Business Readers Global, I'm a director for public sector and governmental partnership. Within this boardroom, I'm one of the founders of the Business Readers Global. So if you're joining us for the very first time, you can check us out on our website, businessreadersglobal.com. And that is one of the conglomerate and board that I sit on. I'm an etiquette consultant in addition to being a strategic leader and also a pharmacist. I'm a serial entrepreneur, and my lifelong addiction is to continuously improve myself and to learn, right? So to know more about me, please go to princessuduak.com and you can gain insight as to who I am. Now, who is our author? The writer of this book, interestingly, is a very vocal individual, right? And this book, 0 to 1, came about his engagement, as will I say a lecturer now? As a lecturer in Sanford. So it was quite interesting that at the very tail end of his engagement in 2012, that was when this book was written. Peter André Thiel is born 11th October 1967. He's a German-American entrepreneur. He's a venture capitalist and a political activist. He's a co-founder of PayPal, which we all know very well, Palantir Technology, and the Founders Fund. He was the first outside investor in Facebook. According to Forbes, as of May 2025, he was estimated to have his net worth around 20.8 billion, making him the 100 plus richest individual in the world. Thiel has been described as perhaps America's leading public intellectual today, or an intellectual architect of Silicon Valley contemporary ethos. And that is the man, Peter Thiel. How does this book come about? If you flip through the preface, you will see some of the directive or direction about this book. Like I said, in 2012, he had some students, some college students, okay, where he taught on a course called Startup at Stanford, 2012. Now, one of the college students who took note of his teaching was Blake Master, and that is how this book came about. It is a rare thing. It's very concise and it's thought-provoking book on entrepreneur. But most importantly, it is a book on innovation, how to think, where to start from if you have anything related to, a startup. So let's establish the concept that has been enshrined in this book. If you are thinking from 1 to N, which is what he termed as horizontal innovation, it means that you're doing what has already been done. You're only copying people's idea. We all read the book that was written by Renell. I think it's Blue Ocean Strategy. We read that book and we see how you could use the strategy canvas framework to be able to innovate And that innovation is called horizontal innovation. An innovation where you have already an idea and you are improving on that idea, or you're taking that particular idea and spreading it somewhere else. And that is a one to infinity innovation. What Peter described in his book is a vertical innovation, which is driven by technology. So horizontal innovation is driven by globalization. So we keep moving from one region to the other, improving on ideas and concepts that has already been established. So let's say, for instance, I went to the UK recently and I discovered, different ideas, and I come back here and I implement those ideas here. That will be an horizontal innovation. Now, the 0 to 1 concept is such that there's a technological disruption of our environment. And once that happens, you are doing something extremely new, a fresh idea. It could be an invention. It could be a methodology. It could be a collaboration tool. And that is the innovation he calls vertical, and an innovation that is 0 to 1. I really wish I had seen this example. It would have been lovely to capture this in my notes, really. It's so insightful to read, right? Now, if we look at an example like an horizontal innovation example, China is building cities that resemble those in the West, right? The UAE has one of the tallest buildings in the world, but that has already been done before, right? So it's just an idea. It's just copying an idea, and that is called horizontal innovation. The invention of the computer or the internet is completely fresh, is new, and that is a 0 to 1 um, innovation. I'm supposed to be leading chapter 1. I'm leading chapter 1, building the future, the challenge of the future. What are the challenge of the future and how do we build the future? How to build the future? Thiel argues that true innovation is about going from 0 to 1. So you create new value, you reduce cost, you add value for the user. That's a 0 to 1 innovation, not just replicating existing successes. Now, he also noted that although the 20th century brought massive technological breakthrough, progress has slowed in many areas except for computers and digital technology, which we know, which we see. There's been a lot of disruption in our ecosystem. Now, the future, therefore, depends on finding new ways to innovate. How do we innovate? Let's not just copy, let's innovate. Let's innovate vertically. And that's the only way we can build a future, he argues. Now, Peter also introduces a key theme. The future is not predetermined. Nobody knows what is in the future, what is in the horizon. It's something we create. We have to be very intentional about creating our vision, thinking through, using creativity, thinking outside the box, bold thinking, being intuitive to create. And this is very critical. And that is how you can build the future. My key insight and main takeaway from this chapter. Key insight idea 1. Progress has 2 forms. It's either you copy horizontally, and there's nothing wrong with doing that, but you can also innovate vertically, which is very important to build in the future. Now, the key idea 2 is that the future depends on unique ideas. We have to make bold steps. We have to think on how to build new things rather than competing in crowded markets. And I think that is an idea that was clearly postulated in the Blue Ocean Strategy. You have to diversify. You have to think outside the box. You have to go into uncharted waters to be able to innovate vertically. Key idea 3 is that doing what we already know how to do only leads to incremental gain. So you already know this stuff. And that's why I think that is one of the key benefits why we constantly level up, constantly challenge ourselves, constantly come into the boardroom. And like I said, if I'd known this yesterday, I would have been a different speaker, or maybe have something new to share. So imagine 0 to 1, clueless. But today I know, right? So the conversation is different. That's a new game for me. To round up, we must imagine and create the future deliberately rather than assuming it will happen automatically. And I think that is a better place to imagine what the future would look like and how we can build the future, right? And I want to be able to leave this room to challenge your thinking, to be able to innovate vertically, as mentioned by Peter, rather than just horizontally. So we can do both. There are products and services where we can innovate horizontally in our organization. But of course, there is room for us to innovate vertically if we have to think deeply to be able to do that. So on that premise, I want to say thank you. And I also want to welcome the next speaker, Sir Oluwatoyin, to lead us through chapter 2 of 0 to 1. Any question? Sorry, my camera was here, but because I have two screens and I always prefer to look at the bigger screen. So my face would have been looking outside my camera. Any question, please? You can unmute. Any question, or should we go for? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can,
We can
Princess.
hear you. I can hear you.
So any question, or do we take feedback? Yeah, I kept the time. Is 20 minutes. Yep.
Okay,
Any question?
Princess, thank you. No
Thank you very
questions.
much.
I wanted to make a contribution, a
Please.
comment before I ask my question. Okay, so thank you very much. That was a very concise, 0 to 1, 1 to N. However, I have a question, to ask. And then, yes, I must agree with you. Before I go on the question, I must agree with you. This is a that stimulates thinking of new things, new ideas, how to come up with new solutions to problems. However, I was listening to the 0 to 1, 1 to N concept. And then I'm looking at the disparity in the levels of technological development in different parts of the world. Of course, where you have the first world countries, third world countries. In as much as I know, he says there's nothing wrong with replication of technological ideas. I'm thinking in some parts of the world, I think replication has to happen first. That's the 1 to N
1 to
has
N.
to happen before the 0 to 1. Or do you think 0 to 1 can happen, at the same time and at the same rate globally, considering the disparities that we have?
Okay, I can take that. I can also take that question. So, I don't think the disruption meets us at the same point in time, globally, right? Even globalization, the advancement of the market and all of that doesn't happen at once, right? They might be late bloomers, you have late adopters, even with the if we have to look at the technological life cycle, and you saw that, and I think I presented that over the weekend, the last week that just passed. You looked at the technological life cycle, you see that there are innovators. We would have innovators in the system. We will have early adopters in the system. We will have late adopters, and that applies to different nations across a particular time, right? So, and it really does depend on a lot of variables. It's not just technology disrupting the market. It is the rate in which it is disrupting the market and the rate at which the leaders are intentional about certain structures that would cause innovation to happen, right? I don't know if that makes sense. So globalization does not happen at the same time. Likewise, innovation, whether 1 to n or 0 to 1, it will never happen at the same time. Let's take, for instance, COVID-19, the COVID situation that happened 2019, right? Some regions were more impacted than others. Ebola happened in our region. We were more impacted than others, right? And once you have this kind of disruptors in the system, it depends on the region in which is most impacted, the level of awareness of that particular nation, their ability to respond to such innovation, and their readiness, technological readiness. So a lot of factors play into this. I don't know if that answers your question.
Have a better, it's clearer. Yeah. So maybe I should put it in my own words to see if I really understand, your explanation. So it means for every country, or for whichever area where you find yourself, for every location, innovation will happen at their own pace. I think that's what you're saying. Yeah, depending on whatever factors will stimulate innovation in that location. So yes, I think I get it. Yes, it will happen at your own pace. It doesn't have to be at the same time everywhere. So it's okay. I get it. Thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome. All right. Any other question? Any other question? If you look at UAE, UAE is an hyper globalized environment. For instance, UAE, Singapore, the same thing. Bring the same innovation down to Nigeria or Africa. It will be crawling. It will be crawling. You know what I mean, right? So you cannot compare. It won't happen at the same rate for sure. For a lot of factors, political reason, technological reason, for a lot of factors. Even the exposure to the globalization will be different. The impact will be different. Any question? Any contributors?
May I just lean in a bit there?
Yes,
So
please.
yes, you've nicely explained the major points with regards to technological advancements within the geographical eco systems that define themselves, and how they either find a way of um, being stunted, or seeing that growth basically. So what I would say that another very important factor in technological advancements, when we talk about, for instance, the startup ecosystem and all of that, is the great marketing that goes into that system, especially in North America, and Europe, basically. You find that for a lot of things that they do, they try as much as possible to market it even beyond the original value. So for it, say for instance, most of these tech companies and all of them, they are all built on valuations, right? They're all built on what their value can reach sometime in the future. It's not as if when you hear Google or Apple has a valuation of probably 20 billion, 20 trillion, this or that. It doesn't mean that that's their current value, but they place that value on them because of the potential that those organizations have, basically. And so if we look at what is missing in some other parts of the world, sometimes it's that ability to crystallize, to add value to what we are doing, basically. I'll give a quick example. You mentioned Singapore, you mentioned some of those places. I would say Asia, for one, has been even more advanced in technology than the Western world for quite some time. I remember in the 80s, I remember when a family member visited Japan, the sort of electronic gadgets that he came back home with, it's not something that we had even seen in the West at that time. But basically, I think the West knows it. They know the business strategies. They understand how to, sell their products. They can sell, a dead dog to you and you buy it. They can sell anything to you and you literally buy it. So I think that's another part that's missing from the rest of the world, from another area that the rest of the world is missing on, in terms of capitalizing on marketing and being able to place some value on what they have to give. So I'll just stop there. I'm just trying to connect it to what you've been saying. I don't know if it makes sense.
I think it does. I think it does, because globalization is one thing, but being able to market your products and services is another thing. And like you say, true to the word, the West is very good at the optics. They're very good with marketing, and yeah, interesting. Thank you for that submission. Any other input?
Yeah, I just this is a rider to what Mr. Oluwatoyin said. Yeah, I completely agree with him. Because sometimes I look at some of the items we produce here in Nigeria, such as bags, made from leather. The truth is sometimes the quality is even much better than what you would get from the West. But because they have a very good marketing strategy, they know how to position their products, they know how to sell, which I believe is what we're lacking here. Because truth be told, we have a lot of quality products from this part of the world. However, being able to position them properly, make them, visible, and be able to market them well is the problem. So thank you for bringing that up, Mr. Tui. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, ma.
Yeah, hello.
Perfect.
I
Yeah.
have a contribution to make.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I cannot show I'm not in a very good, my location is not bright enough for me to display my face. So I just want to add up based on the introduction, your presentation, from what the writer equally recommended was for innovation as an entrepreneur and a startup generally, you should not start a business that poses competition. You are not competing with anyone. It should be that it is a business that should have a long-term value, not for a short-term period of time, not for a short term. because a lot of businesses that have were not successful generally were attracting themselves to their competitors, not the product itself, not what they are giving out as value. So, just like Miss Nella stated, and Miss Princess, growth generally it's according to your own pace. You are doing it to be successful, so it should not don't attract, don't look at it as a competition. That way, he said that you cannot be successful as an entrepreneur. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Afsa, for the contribution. I think at this point we want to welcome Sir Oluwatoyin for chapter 2 of this book, because we're 30 minutes into our time. And chapter 2 states party like it's 1999. I don't know who was around at that time. 1999. All of you were around, right? All of you were
Obviously,
around. Yeah,
obviously.
so
We
party like
were
it was in the 90s. We were partying like it was in the 80s, the 70s. But I don't know if the music would be right for you guys in the 90s, because, okay, let's see. I don't see any Gen Z here in this group. Oh, ha. So I want to welcome Sir Oluwatoyin from Canada to join us to facilitate chapter 2 of this book. Sir, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks for having me, everyone. Okay, so Princess has laid the foundation and giving us a lot of key points and key takeaways, as the writer alludes to, the introduction and chapter 1, talking about the future. And I will be continuing in that direction in taking us through chapter 2 of the book, which Princess rightly tagged Party Like the 90s, or 1990. Party Like it's 1999, actually. I almost followed Princess in said the 90s. Yeah, like it's 1999. And if most of us can remember very well, there was something very very unique about that period, that year 1999, because it was sort of the year prior to the the millennium or millennial crossover, which is the year 2000, and there was a lot of you know a lot of skepticism, a lot of half truths, a lot of postulations and what have you around the happenings of that period, even which cuts across religious, scientific, and what have you. So that was a very important period, I must say. Like Princess rightly said, we're all around. So if you can remember, to the crossover between 99 and 2000. Some people said it was going to be the end of the world and all of that. But of course, here we are. Okay, so I'll just rush into the introduction. It says, Introduction to Contrarian Truths. One of the things I like about this setting, I mean, the Business Readers Global, when we read books, is that we get to learn new words, we get to understand new vocabulary and concepts. And one of those today is contrarian. Contrarian. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it well, like Princess said. Okay, so, and that says, if I'm looking at my dictionary, it just says it's a person who opposes or rejects popular opinion or correct practice, especially in stock exchange dealing. So somebody who opposes or rejects popular opinion. So where everyone else is going in one direction, that person goes in another direction. So that's the meaning of the word. So here we are told that, the chapter opens up with a question. It says, what important truth do people agree with you on? So what important truth do people agree with you on? I think I'm not sharing my slide yet. Let me share it. Sorry, I stopped it for a while just to check on something. Okay, let me share it now. Okay. Okay, yeah. Let me put it on the slide mode. Yeah, so it says, what important truths do people agree with you on? Basically, it says the most critical truths are often those that few people accept. Asking what important truths do few people or the few agree with you on, says challenges group think and reveals deep innovation potential. So there's this guy called Friedrich Nietzsche. I had to go learn how to pronounce that name. He's a German scientist and a scholar. So Friedrich Nietzsche was this kind of person who, was always a contrarian. He was always, on the other side of what people would agree with. So he has this insight where he says, madness is rare in individuals, but in groups, in parties, that's in a party of people, in a group of people, in nations and ages, it is the rule. So he's saying that you rarely find madness, in individuals. So when we talk about madness, now we're talking about, the way our behaviors, the way people behave and all of that. You rarely find one man who would be maybe the activist. I don't want to call the activists in Nigeria. I don't want to call their names so that we don't get criticized for calling them. So basically, you don't want to be that man who disagrees every time. But you will find that trend occurring in groups, in parties, in nations, and and ages. So when it says ages, across time, and it says that is the rule. So, and it says it is used to highlight how collective delusions can shape market trends and business decisions. So this guy, Friedrich Nietzsche, postulated this. Unfortunately, this guy, I learned he also went mad in real life. So, for some health reasons, even though he said madness is rare in individuals, he eventually became mad. So that's the irony of it. So basically, the writer was trying to put to us here that, basically, people think differently. When you look at the concepts that Princess had mentioned before, the horizontal and the vertical, ways of expansion, basically, we see that, the people who think differently, those guys, the Bill Gates of this world, the Jeff Bezoses of this world, and the other ones, they have that boldness, they have that confidence, they have that exceptional trait in them in the way that they can think differently from every other person. So generally, that's why we could look at them in, in that premise of, being a contrarian in that sense, people who do things differently. And okay, so the writer talks about dot-com example of group delusion. Says during the dot-com bubble, it became widely accepted that businesses could thrive on eyeballs and page views alone. So we know what that means. The internet came alive. So it became a norm that people could thrive on eyeballs and page views alone, ignoring profitability, a classic case of collective irrationality. So at that point, even though companies were not making money, based on some of the issues I told you about, the fact that we had the dot-com bubble, or the millennial bug, or is it millennium bug they called it at the time. You know, there was a lot of businesses that crashed, a lot of businesses that were not doing well around that time, you know, but, you know, people ignored that trend and still decided to, you know, go on to invest in those companies, you know. So when you look at it, you see that usually it is the trend that dictate the market. So for instance, today, okay, everyone is invested in the stock market, and we hear of different rumors, different things. Sometimes some people will say buy the dip, some people will say go for the the crash. When the market has crashed, that's when you should go in. So you see that those behaviors are being dictated by sort of a group or head mentality, I'll call it, you know. So it's not something that, you know, people do individually. They just hear of an information and they go for it. So that's what the writer was trying to say here. You know, it's talking of group delusion. And it talks about the importance of independent thinking. Thiel argues that true innovation often emerges from going against prevailing beliefs, which I mentioned before, requiring courage to stand intellectually and entrepreneurially apart from the crowd. So if you must be that man that would change the world, if you must be that man that would bring innovation to the world, then you must dare to think differently. You must dare to reason different. You must differently. You must dare to, you know, to walk in the other direction when people are going this way. When people are saying it's not possible, you know, you are standing firm and saying it's possible. You can see that in folks like Elon Musk, you know, when the electric car dream, you know, was brewing and everything. We can see that in people like the Dangotes in Nigeria, even though I wouldn't call Dangote a startup kind of initiative, because he is doing something that, you know, is not a 0 to 1 principle, basically, because he's doing something that, you know, already exists. It's just, you know, repeating it, but it still takes, you know, a very dogged person to be able to stand in the midst of the kind of opposition that he has gone through to get to where he is now. So that's very important for us to know. Also, yeah, we see that in the 1 minute. Yeah, in the 1990s, you know, there was that optimism that then became uncertainty. You know, we talked about the Cold War, the end of the Cold War, the fall of the Berlin Wall. There was a lot of reason for people, you know, to be optimistic. People didn't know if we're going to have, at first, just before the fall, it looked as if there was going to be probably a third world war. And then going on, you know, we had, you know, the Cold War ending and a lot of new things coming up around the world in terms of global politics and all the rest. So there was that skepticism, that optimism, basically, which led to quite a lot of uncertainty. You know, there was an economic recession which followed, globalization fears and trade anxiety. You know, that was when we all started coming together as nations to even be more cohesive in the way we do things and all of that. Just like right now, you know, there's a lot of anxiety with what, you know, is going on, the trade tariffs and all of that. So these things are not new. We keep seeing them. It's like a cycle. And the writer is trying to let us understand here that, you know, as much as all of this happens, as long as there's the uncertainty, you know, there's a shifting sentiment, public mood, you know, pivoted from, says, triumphalism to skepticism. Media narratives began focusing on economic threats, outsourcing, and stagnating wages. And so we saw most of the jobs move from the West to the East. And that is why today we're now trying to bring back those jobs from the East to the West. So basically, it was a contradiction of what's going on. Today, it was like the far opposite of what's going on today. And so, again, what happened? The internet emerges, and we could see that there was another new trend. So say how the web transformed from obscurity to ubiquity. And what does that mean? It says, then at that point, with all of these uncertainty going on in the 90s, so we got a pivotal point where, things started improving quite rapidly. We saw the introduction of the Mosaic browser. I don't know if anyone can remember that. I still remember the sign of that Mosaic browser. That came in 1993. We saw, Netscape, that came in 94. And then rapid internet expansion in the late 90s, which saw an explosive internet adoption from 1995 to 2000. So we saw global users increasing from 16 million to over 360 million people. And that had a great economic impact, of course. And that's what has led to this age that we are in terms of all of the AI and this and that and whatever, because people started, more and more people started using the internet, and more people started using, things that were related to the internet, like the devices, the computers, the iPads, the phones, and all of that. So that's basically an evolving story that has led to some sort of, galvanization in the way the world economy, has sort of emerged. So very important. And when we look at the 1998 September period to March 2000, there was what we call the dot-com euphoria, which I mentioned earlier on. So the writer says that a frenzy of investment between late 1998 and early 2000, there was venture capital flooded into tech startups, like what we are seeing sometime, or I think it has slowed down now, but in the last 3 or 4 years, we saw a lot of tech ventures of tech startups, and venture capital funding coming into the African, region and all of that. So this happened back in the 1998, and that brings us back to the question which Nenlab asked earlier on, to say, when you compare us to, or some parts of the world to others, some are fast-paced in adopting or adapting these technologies, and some are slower paced. And again, all of these boils down to investment. It is where the money, you need to follow the money to see where technology advancement will go to. Wherever the money is going to, that's where you get those advancements. And if that's, like we said earlier, if that sort of environment, or that business ecosystem hasn't matured yet, or is not ready, for instance, it could be social, political, or in the 1998, when we were talking about all of these venture capital flooding into those startups, we were still struggling to even transition into a democracy, for instance. So that was a huge, that was a huge factor for us not to participate. And most African countries, have just started becoming more stable, this last few years. And that's why you can see the money trickling down, investments, a lot of investment coming this way. So these are factors that enable growth, basically, in countries, in economies. These are factors, once, you have a stable economy, you have a stable business ecosystem, then the capital starts flowing. And then again, for Nigeria, for instance, we have a projection of the youngest set of, youthful people that would be on earth in the next few years to come. And that's already creating some sort of market for us. That's already giving investors some sort of, nod that this is where they need to start investing. So things like that, those are the factors that would usually drive these technological advancements, not just the fact that we are willing to do it. Because no matter how willing you are, if the capital is not there, you will be stunted. So that is how it works. That's how the game works, basically. So The writer also talks about on sustainable business models. Says startups embrace models focused on growth at any cost, often prioritizing paid views or user growth over profit, expecting scale to eventually create value. So, which is part of what I talked about earlier. It's not, they're not acting based on the true value of their organization or company at the very point in time, but it's all future evaluations, future growth forecasts, And the writer was saying these are kind of unsustainable business models, which has worked for some anyways. But if you look at the startup failure rate, basically, they said 1 out of every, I don't want to get the figures mixed, but I know it's over 100 or something. Let's say 1 out of every 100 startups survive. So you can imagine the failure rate of startups. So not every startup that sort of starts operationally, would survive, even though they have the money. We could see in Nigeria, for instance, we could count a lot of startups, or in Africa, that have just, sort of gone out of the equation this last few years. They raised a lot of good capital, some in the 50s, some in the hundreds, I'm talking of hundreds of millions and 50 million and the likes, and they couldn't sustain their growth. So it's not just about, and that's what the writer is talking about here on sustainable business models, because when that money comes in, you need to then get the return on investment for the investor. It's not the fact that the money comes in that's made you a winner. Sometimes people think that raising capital is the end of the road, and that's just the beginning. So it's very important for us as business owners, business people, to know that, each time we go for that next round, for that next to raise that next round, to seek for capital, it's just the beginning of of the work that is ahead of us. And also, this writer talks about there was something called the cultural mania in Silicon Valley. Says the valley was engulfed by a gold rush mindset. Office parties, wild perks, and excessive optimism became the status symbol of that era. And also, we remember talking about in the period between 98 and 2000, and he said a market detached from reality. Many investors believed tech will defy economic fundamentals, and this disconnection laid the groundwork for eventual crash. So remember, we had that, very bad period or bad era where there was a crash, an economic crash. So talks about the writer also talks about the PayPal early days where there was chaos, anxiety, and pivoting under pressure. Good to know that I think Elon Musk was also part of the PayPal team and all of that. I think he came in later, and whatever, the different stories around that. So basically, Peter Thiel described running PayPal during the dot-com boom as a deeply stressful experience, surrounded by a whole volatile market and uncertain future. And he talks about the failing first idea. PayPal's original product, it was a way to beam money between Palm pilots, and it failed to gain traction in meaningful markets, highlighting the gap between novelty and utility. And if you remember in our last book, when we read about, knowing when to either
Pivot or persevere.
Thank you, pivot or persevere. Thank you. So that's the right word. Persevere. That's what I was looking for. So basically, PayPal knew what to do, so they had a shift to sort of an email-based, payment unlocked real user growth. So they solved that problem, and they found product market fit, the right word, product market fit, amid the chaos. So very important for us as business people, your product market fit, business model, all of these things are what will determine the future of our business. It doesn't matter whether it's a small business, whether it's a startup, whether whatever. If you don't have the product market fit, if you have all the money in the world, that goes down the drain eventually. Okay, so because of our time, I'll just go really fast because I see that we are now close to the might ending of this presentation. So I'll just give you a small sort of scenario here, which talks about the pivoting to survival, PayPal's emails payment strategy. So talks about a strategic adaptation in the midst of a bubble, a clearer value proposition. They had rapid user growth through virality, simplicity, and ubiquity, and also operational strengths and burn rates. Did we talk about burn rates during the last book read? Does anybody remember if we talked about the meaning of burn rates? Does anyone know what burn rate means? Those are startup terms. I think we should have mentioned it in that other book. The last book we read, what's it called? So burn rate is the speed at which a company, particularly a startup, spends its cash reserves before becoming profitable. So, that's another new terminology we're learning. It is the speed at which a startup burns out its, cash flow before becoming profitable. So those are very key. And also, another thing we need to look at is the post-crash reflection, Silicon Valley's new rules. Basically, there was a shift from vision to incrementalism. There was lean and flexible as default, which means that the lean startup ethos emerged. So that was when they started practicing, lean startup, which was the last book we read, actually. So because before things were just all over the place, but now they started adopting new measures to ensure that, we had the advocacy for minimal viable product, which is the MVP, quick pivots, cost discipline as a survival tool. So we can always relate all of these back. So the writer is just giving us a sort of a storyline of how things were from the 90s all the way down into the bubble, the dot-com bubble period, and even the post era. So basically, we could see that some people learned from other people's mistakes. Now we know that okay, we have to be lean. We can't afford to start a company and then think after starting the company. We have to think first, which is part of what we learned in the lean startup. We have to first of all look into the definition of what we are doing and how to go about it before we now start building. So it's very important. So also it talks about improvement over invention. Silicon Valley's new doctrine emphasizes refining existing products and business models rather than creating entirely new markets. Deprioritizing sales and bold plans. Sales teams and strategic planning were often downplayed in favor of engineering excellence and agile responsiveness. And that's what I talked about before. Sometimes, the way you prioritize your sales, your marketing, and all of those things also determines how far your product will go and how far it will, basically last in the market. So if you have the best product in the world without having a good sales team, it might as well sit in your inventory. So I'll stop here. And so from all of what we've discussed, the writer is just giving us an insight into how the evolving situation of that startup ecosystem, of how people started thinking differently, and that's where we talked about that word earlier on, the prairie or whatever, and for you to be a standout, or for you to be someone who excels at doing something differently, you have to learn not to think like everyone else. You have to learn to believe and learn to, have faith in what you're doing. And it's only a matter of time before you see the results. So thank you. I'll stop here and I'll ask for any questions from my presentation. Thank you very much.
So, Oluwatoyin, how are you? Thank you very much. For those who are joining us, thank you very much for joining. That was a beautiful presentation, very packful presentation. The moment I saw your slide, I was like, wow, this is heavy. And then I saw the details and the content, which is very important especially for chapter 2. And you truly walk us through every aspect that was discussed in chapter 2. So thank you very much for that very detailed presentation. Do we have any comment in the house? Engineer Ken, are you still there? Dr. Murayo? Dr. Murayo? Absa, any comment? Do we still have Pharmacist Nella? Any comment?
No, I think it's just David and Afsa and Dr. Mariah. Most
Oh,
persons
Papa.
have left.
Your
Yeah.
last words, because I think for me, chapter 1 was practically very light, right? Introducing the subject matter on how to innovating whether horizontally or vertically. I think that was a very light chapter to discuss, considering if we have to merge both the prefix, which was practically the introduction, into chapter 1. Yeah, so chapter 2 is very detailed, giving us background, giving us the history, giving us, I can see all the flowers that is shared for you, Oluwatoyin. You can see the love and the flowers in the boardroom going up there. And
Thank you. Thank you so
caution,
much.
pragmatism, and the new startup orthodox. Um, I mean, it's very insightful what we're going to learn in this book. You can see a lot of correlation from other books that we've read, in time past, and just building up to 0 to 1. Quite interesting book, I must say. Do we have any comment? If not, we can just close. It's 10:04, which is my Dubai time. I'm still using my Dubai time, but that means it's 7:04 in Nigerian context and environment. Yeah, so any comment, input, question, comment, addition, subtraction, your take? There are lots of bouquets for you. And it's like a blossom cherry kind of bouquet, even with specification.
Princess.
Yeah, even with specification. That's coming from Dr. Morayo. Lovely.
Thank you.
Please try to invite people to the boardroom. A lot of people want to join. Let's keep the momentum in our chat room so that we can enlighten others to join. And most of the time when we are on call, please try to take picture and just send to the boardroom so that people are reminded and they get to know what is happening in the boardroom. So tomorrow we're going to be going into chapter 3 and 4, and I think that chapter will be led by, let me quickly pull out our calendar. So that chapter will be led by Dr. Sam and Pharmacist Nella. All right. So please, David, can we have the flyer this night so that we can start raising awareness, and we can also have it on all our media handles? Thank you so very much for your time. Thank you for joining us in the boardroom. It's good to be back. Saulu, what do you think? It's good to
Thank
be
you,
back.
ma.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
to be able to juggle our presentation slide and, find the time to read. It's good to be back. We can't stop learning, right? Yeah. Thank you so very much for an insightful evening, and good night.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.